Okay, looks like we can go ahead and get started here. Thanks everyone for joining the webinar, whatever time of day it might be wherever you are. We appreciate you taking some time out to spend some time learning a little bit more about Explain Everything and some lesson ideas that can be created using our whiteboard. Today I have myself and then one of our co-founders, Bart, who's run a number of webinars here with me as well.
Welcome everyone.
Great. So the focus of today will be kind of talking through some lesson ideas and how Explain Everything can be used both to create assignments for some of the lessons for students, and then also to kind of replace the standardized lesson plan that would either be drawn out or put in a binder and then use later, and how to digitalize that experience with using Explain Everything. So just some kind of ideas to kind of get you started here and get you excited about using the whiteboard.
And just one housekeeping item, as we'll be providing illustrations and presenting the ideas, please go ahead and ask us questions using chat. We'll be responding to those. So you can interrupt us. We will then pick up and continue our pace of presenting.
Great. Yeah, so you can use the question and answer box or the chat function built into the webinar here. Again, thanks for everyone who's joined again. I know last week we had some technical difficulties with this webinar, so I'm excited that we got everything fixed and are able to now present it to you today.
Also, this webinar is going to be recorded, so those that cannot participate today during this live session will get the recording of the webinar.
Great. So just like many of the other webinars we've run, for those of you that have been able to join, we'll be using the Explain Everything whiteboard to present today. So what you can think about is everything that you're seeing is being delivered to you through our whiteboard. So if you like something that you see today, or you want to replicate this within your own meeting space, something like that, or your own teaching or training space, whatever kind of work that you do, that can be done with Explain Everything. So it's not just a whiteboard to kind of create videos or to deliver content, but it can be used just like we're using today in this webinar style. Great. So the agenda for today is I'm going to go through a quick 10 to 15-minute demo of our with what's possible here. I won't go through all of the features, all the tips and tricks, but I'll go through what we call the hero workflow, which is kind of just the high-level workflow of what's possible within Explain Everything. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, feel free to interrupt with questions as we go through it. We'll be keeping an eye on the question and answer section there.
Great. Absolutely.
So on the left-hand side of the whiteboard here, this is what we call the toolbar. So within the toolbar, we have a number of different tools that are used to create either screencasts or projects or whatever you want to call them within this canvassing space. Now, these tools are prioritized in terms of both their importance and then how often they're used by our users. Right, so they're not necessarily prioritizing how important we think they are, but by how important our users think they are and are using them. So what we have at the top here is what we call the Insert Media button. And nested under this button is a number of different options to insert any different types of media that might interest you. So for today, what we're going to do is we're just going to pop in a quick PNG file here, right, just the Explain Everything logo. We're also going to add in, let's see what we have here. Those are just my recent documents. I'm going to go into my Google Drive, and I'm going to bring out a PDF file from my Google Drive. So here's a quick one-pager that just talks about what Explain Everything can do. And I'm going to insert this in stacked format within one slide. I could do it on separate slides if I like. For today, I'm just going to insert it into one slide. Great. So now we have the logo, we have two different PDFs here, and maybe I'll add, just to make it a little bit more exciting, maybe I'll add a FaceTime video in here as well. Great. So now we kind of have set up what we call our canvassing space. Now what we can do is we can use this button down here to record the interactions that are happening on the screen. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Hello, this is Sam from Explain Everything, and today we're going to talk about, just give a little bit of an overview of what's possible in Explain Everything. So I'm going to zoom in here to a quick kind of overview PDF and talk a little about what's possible. So with Explain Everything, we like to really promote the idea of interactive learning, the ability to instruct in real time, the idea that you can learn without boundaries, because there's really kind of no boundary within the Explain Everything workspace, how you can capture everything. Oopsies. You can capture everything and then share it. And as I'm doing now, you can use media to tell the entire story. Great. Now I will pause and back out. Great. So that was just kind of a really high level intro to what's possible here. What you see that I've just popped out at the bottom there is what we call the timeline. Right? And within this timeline, there's two different things. Let me just scrub back to the beginning. At the top of the timeline, this is what we call the kind of the media part of the timeline, right? So you can scrub through this part of the timeline, and you can see that everything that's happening on the whiteboard is being captured here in this part of the timeline. At the bottom is what we call kind of the voice track, right? So we have the media track and the voice track. And if I play that back, you should be able to hear it. If not, it might. Great. So again, there's two tracks here, and you can go through that track and you have the option to kind of do some kind of very nice light editing features within this space, right? So, you know, I could take, if I didn't want to, during this part here, let's say, during the Zoom part, this first 10 seconds of this Zoom, I wanted to just kind of remove this until I start doing the highlighting. What I can do is take that, and I'm going to use this thing called delete and compact. Now you just have this kind of jump right into that recording. And say at this point, I want to point out this idea that we're talking about learning without boundaries. I could use the arrow feature to actually pop an arrow in right there. And what you'll see is now if I scrub back through this timeline and I play it, to instruct in real time, the idea that you can learn without boundaries, because there's really kind of no boundary within. Oops.
Perfect timing, I would say.
Right. So what you can do there is you can actually pop in these different elements that are really nice and kind of can make your video a little bit more dynamic. Right. So there's kind of a ton of possibilities in that recording space. Now, finally, in terms of recording, I want to talk about this ability to mix record. Now, mix record is basically adding another layer of recording on top of an existing recording. So I already have my voice, I already have my zooming and my highlighting. Now I might want to add another kind of layer of highlighting to something that's already existing. What I can do is, as long as I'm in mix mode here, I can hit that record button, I can actually mix it. I'm going to lock my voice track, because I already have a great voice track in there that I like. And I'm going to hit the record button. Sam from Explain Everything, and today we're going to talk about, just give a little bit of an overview of what's possible in Explain Everything. So I'm going to really promote the idea of interactive learning, the ability to instruct in real time, the idea that you can learn without boundaries, because there's really kind of no boundary within the Explain Everything work. Great. Right. So now this might not you know, the video that we're creating today might not be something that we would post online or something that'd be really useful for learning in class, but it gives you this idea of what's possible with the recording feature and Explain Everything, right? So what you see here is I've actually layered recordings on top of each other. So it looks like I'm doing all of this at once, whereas what I'm actually doing is I'm going back through and layering existing recordings on top of new recordings. So at that bottom, you see that arrow pops in and I'm still doing some highlighting. It's quite neat. You can kind of create this feel of a kind of a lot of different things happening during one kind of capturing sequence.
There's one interesting hint here. So Sam, could you tap through those actions that you see on the top Oh, exactly. Because timeline shows you what kind of activities you did on the canvas. So you can edit those activities. If you don't like something, you can delete it, as Sam just shows now. And this mixed recording allows you to add additional layers. So it's not like video recording that you might use using video editors. It's rather capturing all the activities and allows you to add more for more sophisticated result.
Exactly. Right. So there's the ability to kind of go back here and really draw attention to what you're trying to do within the recording space. Great. So again, I didn't show you all of the features here. You know, there's quite a few other neat things within that media button that you can add. You know, I could add in a live browser, and if I wanted to, I could do something like go to Desmos.com, which is a great kind of graphing calculator. I could bring in a graph and, you know, y equals 6x. And I could crop this out of the browser, boom. And maybe I could use this in, write an explanation that I'm creating, right? So there's this ability to kind of use any different type of media. It's not just a FaceTime video or some existing PDF. You can bring in live browsers and record and crop what's in those as well, which is quite nice. So that is the Explain Everything whiteboard, the ability to kind of bring in anything, record it, and then easily share it out. I'm not going to go through all of the tools here, but there is kind of a lot to explore and a lot to get familiar with as you go through it. And you'll see Bart and I use a little bit more of it today.
And also, we do have webinars that cover those features and functions that you see on the left side of the screen. So if you're interested in the functionality of Explain Everything, try to sign up for those webinars or watch what we recorded and shared on YouTube.
Great. Yes, all of this is recorded. So now the real purpose of today was to talk about these lesson ideas, right? So the first thing I want to talk about is kind of creating a template for a lesson that can be given in a classroom space, right? So say you're doing a lesson on the water cycle. Now, you could deliver the lecture or the instruction in a number of different ways using Explain Everything, right? You could have all of your slides brought in to Explain Everything and kind of teach the different parts of the water cycle, teach the different elements that happen during the water cycle, teach evaporation one day and condensation the next, and have this all kind of encapsulated into a kind of final project. And what that could look like is something like this, right? Where I have these different elements of the water cycle, right? And what I could say is, all right, I'm going to give this to a student, for example, right? And I'm going to have them create their own project as a homework assignment or an in-class assignment, right? It could be a lesson that I'm giving them and saying, you know, now that I've taught you what these things are as a review, as recall, I'm going to now give you this assignment and you're going to create your own project based on these elements, right? So they could take something like this where they have these 4 words and they have the definitions here, right? And what they could do is put them in the correct space, right? So it looks like evaporation might go there, collection might go here, condensation, precipitation might happen here, and maybe condensation goes up there, right? And now they have these different elements here, right? These different definitions, and what they could do is actually create a project with this, right? Where they describe what each of these things are that they just learned about is, and they'd all have their own project, right? Their own creation that then they could share that back with the teacher. It could be an assignment that they would put into something like, you know, Google Drive or Google Classroom as an assignment, or it could be an in-class assignment that they just, you know, airdrop or easily share with the teacher on their device. And now in terms of sharing it, if I was a teacher and I wanted to share this with my students, that can happen in a number of different ways, right? So for example, all I'd have to do in order to share a template like this would be to hit this button, right? And export it or create it as a web video link, right? If I had a number of slides and I wanted to just export this slide as like a PDF and share it with a student or my students that way, I can easily do that. I can just hit export there. I can export it as, let's say, a PDF document. And let's make sure here, I'm just choosing, oh, there we go. Right, I can actually choose which slides I want to share, right? So if I just want to share that slide, I can deselect all, boom.
So that would be the way to share the static image, right?
Share the static image,
yeah.
right? So I'm just sharing basically the PDF or the static image of this slide. Now, if I want them to be able to interact with it, right, I could export this slide into its own project and share it as a web video link, where I could actually create a video describing what I want them to do, right? It would actually be almost like instructional, where I'm giving them instructions on, okay, you're going to take this picture and you're going to put in the correct words in the correct places, and then you're going to tell me kind of what each thing is and why it's important as part of the water cycle. And I could actually share that as a link. Boom, I could hit once it's compressed, I could share it as a link, and they could actually watch it and then download that file and then create their own project from it and share it back to me, right? And these kind of sharing possibilities are quite nice and easy within Explain Everything, as it's a pretty kind of open platform and format, as I can kind of share it to any of these spaces here.
And it's, what is unique is that you can choose as a teacher if you want to suggest to your students to share back visuals with you, static visuals, or the response in form of a video file.
Right, exactly. It could be, the formatting is quite simple here. You could share it as a URL.
Right.
You could share it as a static image. You could share it as an MP4 file. For example, what a lot of folks are doing is they're creating videos in Explain Everything and then posting them on their channel on YouTube, right? And then the students go to that YouTube channel and are watching a video and answering an assignment or using that formula that's being taught by the teacher to answer some questions, right? So it's really kind of however you like to share things with your students, we make that possible and Explain Everything. Great. And feel free, again, if there's any questions there, feel free to post them as we go. We want to make sure that we're not moving too fast and that you're getting questions answered for some of these lesson ideas.
We have our eyes on the chat, so feel free to post your questions and we'll respond to them.
Great. So the next idea, so that was kind of just a quick assignment that could easily be shared out. What I've done now is I've created almost like a lesson template, right? So for the teachers out there, or for anyone that's delivering instruction, right? What you do in order to kind of prep for either a new unit or a new assignment is you kind of want to create this lesson plan around the outcomes that you're trying to reach with your students, right? So if I'm trying to understand whether my students' reading comprehension is up to a certain point or it's been mastered for a certain grade level or reading level, there's different ways that I can create lesson plans to do that. And what we did today was we used Explain Everything to create this lesson plan and then also deliver an assignment that could test or assess whether students are mastering concepts that we want to learn about. Okay, great. So this is basically what we would call a kind of substitution. So we're substituting the kind of really traditional style lesson plan into something that's more digitalized, like Explain Everything, that can be organized in a much easier way. It can be shared in a much easier way than a lesson plan on, say, a piece of paper. So the teachers out there are probably familiar with this style of lesson plan, but as you prep for a lesson, you always want to make sure you have the correct materials. So for the lesson that we're going to be delivering today, or the assignment, it could be a lesson or an assignment that we're delivering today, what we're looking for is we're creating this reading comprehension assessment in the form of a book report, right? So what we need in order to kind of create this type of assessment or lesson is a book, right? It could be any book. It could be a textbook. It could be, a science textbook. It could be some type of literature. It could be an English book. Whatever your focus is, or whatever you're teaching. Right? So the prep would kind of be, you would have this book, and you make sure that in this book you have some kind of highlights or some notes that are taken. And then the materials that you need would be an iPad or a Chromebook or some type of device that could easily share this stuff, the actual book, some notes, and then Explain Everything.
Mm-hmm.
So the essential questions that we would want to be answered by the students from this lesson or from this assignment that we're creating. So the focus is, again, reading comprehension in the form of a book report using Explain Everything, right? So how are students reading comprehension and literacy skills demonstrated in the chapter summaries? So we want to be able to assess whether we think that the students' reading comprehension is up to standard and whether their literacy skills are up to standard as well. So those two things are really important. And how can the assignment be used to improve reading comprehension? So, in what ways can this type of assignment be used to, really assess these types of skills and assess the improvements of reading comprehension over time? So that's the purpose, right? The purpose is to be able to, if you have a series of book reports just kind of in this style, we want to be able to assess the improvements that are made over time. And then how can you use assignments or lessons like this, increase student reflection and increase awareness of learning processes, right? So how can you see over time, say a set of book reports that a student is given during a lesson or as an assignment, how could you see their improvements or actually understand where the learning is happening or where the gaps might be in their learning, right? So that's the real purpose here, is with the ability to capture everything that's happening on a screen as well as their thinking, the teacher now has the ability to really assess the gaps that might be happening in some of their reading comprehension, in some of their skills. And then finally, what are the learning objectives? So what's the real focus for learning here? What is the objective for learning? What are we trying to improve on? So the students here in a lesson like this, the purpose is to demonstrate reading comprehension by providing a summary of the text in video format. So again, this is a book report. You have a chapter summary, and in this chapter summary, we want to make sure that the student has shown understanding of what's happening in that chapter, kind of plain and simple. Being able to use, the student has to be able to use the analytical and critical thinking skills to create a video that incorporates both audio and video, right? So instead of just creating a book summary in the form of a quick paragraph summarizing what happened in the book, they want to use kind of all of these different tools that they have access to create something that's really their own and is different from maybe the student next to them. It's not just like a summary that anyone could find online, but they really take ownership of their learning and what they know in this entire process. And then finally, this idea that to ensure students are using these kind of 5 steps of critical reading, right? That they're not just kind of reading for a theme or for what's happening in the book, but they're kind of reading in depth, right? They're using their critical skills to make sure that they're really understanding all the elements of what's happening, right? They're able to survey, question, and then read and recall and review. That's kind of the real way to master reading comprehension. Great. So that's kind of the focus of this lesson. That's the things that we're trying to do. Those are the essential questions we're trying to answer in this lesson. And so what is a lesson like this going to look like? And it could be, this could be an assignment that students would do in class or assignment that they would take home. You could almost use this as kind of a flipped classroom assignment where they might do the reading in class that day. Maybe it could be 20 minutes of reading a chapter. Right. And then after that, right, they're actually going to take home and do the assignment or the lesson at home. Or they could do it the other way around, where they read at home and then they come in the next day and they're put in different parts of the room and are creating this kind of book report, right? So let's talk a little bit about what it's about. So this would be, what we'd expect from the students, the instruction that would take place. So the students are going to create a kind of a 2-slide project and explain everything if they have access to it, or it could be kind of in another format if they don't have access to it yet. But the focus is that the teachers and the students are able to both explain everything for this type of lesson. So in the first slide, they're going to create a brief 2 to 3 minute summary of actually what happened in the chapter as a recording, and they're going to use illustrations to support the claims, right? So they're going to review what happened, talk about these main points. This is what happened in the chapter. These are what characters were involved. This was the climax. These were some of the themes that came out. The second slide, they would talk about these new developments. So what's something new that happened in the chapter that we haven't really encountered yet before? Either there's new tension in the book or there's new themes that have arisen, right? So it's just a 2-chapter kind of summary of a book or a chapter within a book.
But here's a question, because you assume that this plan for a lesson is, when provided to students during a lesson, they are going to create those 2 slides using new project and explain everything without starting from the template.
Right.
So we have a question here. What if you would want to share a template? Let's say you create video instructions as a teacher and you share them as a video link.
Yep.
Can you actually, how would you distribute a template when you share your instructions as a video link?
Yes. So that's a great question. So let's see if I have something here, right? So let's jump to what the assignment might look like. So this is the whole kind of lesson plan here, slides 4 through 8. All right, this kind of idea of we've created this lesson now. Now we have this idea in our head as the teacher, as the instructor, of what we want to deliver. Yeah. So now it's quite simple. We have this kind of assignment, which is reading comprehension practice. It's basically a review of what we want from the students, and it's kind of what we had already discussed, right? So, and we didn't even have this slide 3.
Okay.
So we have 2 slides. And what I can do here is I could hit the record button and say, so the assignment for the class today would be able to use the recording that we have and explain everything to summarize chapter 1 of this book. And make sure that when you're doing this, that you're using illustrations to support your claims. Now, oopsies, I didn't have my voice recorded there. So let's go back and hit it.
Yeah,
and now
you can add it later.
Right. So now I could add the recording. So I'll have the highlights already. So in the first slide, you're going to use the recording function and explain everything to summarize chapter 1 of the book. And remember to use illustrations to support your claims. And then in slide 2, we're going to talk about the new developments, right? So what are some of the new developments here? Oopsies. What are some of the new developments? And how did the story progress, right? Were there any new characters that were introduced? And maybe what do you think might be happening next, right? Now that's a little bit messy, but what I could do here, I had it locked again. What I could do here is I could take this template, right, which is actually instructional, and this could be its own slide, so I could basically copy this to a new project, and I could share this out as a video, right, for that student in web video link form. And I could drop this directly into Google Classroom, for example. And the student could then have that assignment to take, they could listen to it, and they could download a copy of it. And then maybe on the next 2 slides, right, this would be the assignment. And then the next 2 slides, they would answer what I was looking for here, right? Slide 1, slide 2, they would hit slide 1 and hit slide 2, and they would answer those questions that I was looking for.
And just to dig a bit deeper, so what actually technically happens when you share instructions, video instructions, as Sam provided, as a web video link, what technically happens is that the project gets uploaded to the cloud. And the web video link is a link to the recording that is created in the cloud. So when student accesses the link to the recording, can also download the project that sits there that is editable. So video will play as a video stream from the link that Sam shared through Google Classroom or other ways of sharing those kind of information. But the link will also allow to download the same project that Sam used.
Exactly, right? So what I did here, I just started a new project just so you can get an example of what I'm talking about. And here is the actual assignment. Now I have a black background, so I'm going to change that. Mm-hmm. Let's lighten this up a bit. Right? So now I have this, and this is just 2 slides here. I can actually delete this slide if I want. I don't need it right now. And this could just be what I share. Boom, right? So I have my assignment, easy enough. I'm going to share it as a web video link, where it's actually taking this project and turning it into a URL. You're probably familiar with the URL style when you click on an email and it has a link to a YouTube video. It's similar to that, except what we allow and explain everything is the ability to then watch that video, but then download it and interact with it. So it's basically this kind of YouTube style video, but you can take it one step further with the ability to download it and interact with it, which is quite nice.
And that's quite unique, this one step further, as Sam called this, because it's actually, we keep two files. We keep video file that plays if someone wants to just listen to the instructions, and we keep the editable file if someone wants to act upon this file. So in this illustration, it will be student using this file as a template.
Right. And there it is, right? So this is with the example of me sharing it into Google Classroom. There it is. There's the Blackboard Explain Everything Drive, right? And I could give this, say, okay, assignment, reading comprehension book report. Great, and I could post that, and that's the assignment. Now every student has the ability to download that and use it. Quite neat and quite unique for Explain Everything.
There's one more question related to the same scenario. So let's say you're using Explain Everything whiteboard that has all those cloud features.
Yep.
As an instructor, as a teacher, and you provide web links to students, but they have Explain EDU. Can they access the recording and the template that sits in the cloud?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So what they would have to do is they'd have to download a copy of that project, right? And then share that project into Explain Everything EDU, right? So I can kind of give what this might look like. So what it would basically, you would send this kind of this link. What it would do is it would actually open in Safari, right? And you'd have to download a copy of that cloud link because you don't have access to this cloud project. You're using Explain EDU. You would just download a copy of that, and it would download it as a movie file, right? So instead of using this URL style back and forth, almost Google Doc-like file where you can interact with it, then you can share it with someone, they can pass it back and forth in the cloud, you would actually just download that assignment as an MP4, and you could actually bring it into a project, or you could just use it as reference when you're doing your assignment.
Yeah.
Right? So for example, right, here is the water cycle assignment. Mm-hmm. All I have to do is hit these three buttons here, hit that download button, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I download a copy of that, right?
And there's also one possibility that Karl-Heinz also mentioned in his question, that is using the Explain Everything whiteboard in a demo mode. So students can use the free version of Explain Everything to download the project and use it for their assignment. Of course, Explain Everything whiteboard that is in the demo mode has some limitations, and they are related to the length of the recording and number of slides that can be created. You can have working scenario.
Yeah, it does work. Okay, so and just to kind of bring this all back together, so I kind of created this idea of creating a book report as a lesson, hopefully to inspire some thoughts from the work that you're doing. You could do a lot with creating different types of lessons here. Again, I talked about the water cycle. I talked about, you could create a skeleton and have all these bones that are outside the skeleton and then put them in the right place. You could have a word bank, almost like a Mad Lib is what we used to call it, right? Where you actually put the right verb in the right place. You could kind of create all these different types of cool assignments for students. And then what does it look like, right? This could be an example of a kind of a quick book report that someone created. Now, there's no voice added to this one, so they're not explaining actually what happened, but it could look something like this, right? Where you have the book, right? You're opening it up and Explain Everything, right? You're taking kind of quick, important snippets out from the book that you might think are important in this book's summary, maybe some kind of highlight words that were some themes that might have happened during this book report, and boom. You've just created something and Explain Everything very quickly, kind of in this book report style, right? So that was, something that took 2 minutes to create. We didn't add our voice to it. That wouldn't probably be enough time to summarize an entire chapter. That was, sped up. But it could look something like that, which is quite neat.
Skills in order to create something like that are actually something we covered during the other webinars. So if you're interested in learning skills about creating book reports, we're going to have a webinar specifically on that. So today, let's just focus on the process of how to drive the lesson, but those technical skills are also going to be covered on other webinars.
Right. So yeah, the kind of the technical pieces of what's happening in this video file that's been created, right? This is kind of more of a glimpse into what it might look like. But these technical things that we're working through right now, like changing the background color and adding in these different kind of little files here in with the different background colors and some annotations and animations in there, all the things that are happening there. We're going to run another webinar kind of called a book report webinar, how to create a book report with Explain Everything. And we'll talk about those technical elements if those things are completely unfamiliar to you. Great. So I have one more kind of example here of something that could be used kind of as a lesson plan or practice, right? And this is kind of more of a standards-based practice when we're thinking about using Explain Everything. I think most people think of Explain Everything as something as a really kind of open-ended creative tool to kind of spark creation or demonstrate what you know. It can also be used kind of in these kind of much more standard-based practices that are really important to make sure that students are able to kind of master some of these really important standards because they're going to be tested on it, right? So, for example, we know how kind of tedious and hard testing for reading comprehension can be, right? So what you can do is something like this, where you actually hit the record button, you have a student read through a passage like this, right? Highlight what the important things might be, talk about the characters here, highlight some of the really important parts of what's happening, the feelings that people are happening, maybe the locations of things. And what they could do is they could actually kind of digest and work through a passage like this, and then you could have something in the style of, and there it is, right? We just had all those highlights there captured in me reading that. I didn't read through the whole thing for time's sake right now. And then you could actually have kind of this, this multiple choice style answer where you could say, based on, and this could again be shared just like an assignment, just like I was showing you before, based on what you know here, over the course of the passage, the main focus of the narrative shifts from what to what, right? And they could talk about what each answer is, why it's not, C, and why the intensity of feeling a character has for another person due to the character's concern that intensity is not reciprocated, why that's more of a theme than something like this. And they could really work through some of these things in their head where reading comprehension can be really hard to assess. And you can actually see how the student is thinking with the ability, again, to record, see how their reading skills are, seeing how their comprehension skills are, see how their analysis and critical thinking skills are, and do that all through kind of these more kind of standard-based practices by bringing in, practice tests directly into Explain Everything and recording them. So just another idea when we're thinking about some lesson plans and some ideas here.
Here's a question. As a teacher, would you suggest to your students to provide answers in a visual form as a static image or text, or would you rather suggest to them to provide their thinking as verbal statement using the recording?
Yeah, so I think to really understand how the student is working through something like this, I think the video format can be, it provides another layer of assessment that is often really hard when you're just looking at, say you give a student a reading comprehension passage or a number of questions and they bring them in, and maybe you're grading them and it looks like they're doing well, but you don't know why they're doing well. You don't know how they're actually digesting this information and how they're coming to these answers. And once you can start to see how they're thinking, I think it changes the way that you're teaching them. And it really kind of adds this other element of, okay, this is where the gaps in understanding are. This is where we should focus on because I can actually see how they're thinking. Now, this isn't going to be something that a teacher can do for every assignment, right? They're not going to have 30 students create 10-minute videos and they're going to review all those videos. Now that's impossible, but for certain projects or certain assignments, this is a great way to understand how people are thinking. And then also, if you want, deliver feedback on how they've done, right? So you can actually see where their gaps are and you can deliver specific feedback and grade them based on a specific performance metric, not just on whether they got something right or wrong.
Right, and it also leaves this artifact of learning that is sitting there in a Google Classroom or whatever, where you store the result of the assignment for later review. And
Yeah.
as you said, the feedback loop here is crucial. So you can respond with a video to a video provided by the student.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing we'll do in some sequential webinars is talk about how to kind of the more technical aspects of passing these things back and forth.
Yeah.
Right, because I think that's important. You know, when we're thinking about, you know, taking a video, digesting it, and then responding with a video, you know, that's, and doing that for every student. You know, I'm a former classroom teacher. I know how long that would take to do for every assignment, and that's not the purpose here. But to really kind of dive into this and the ability to when you're not present with a student, when you're not one-on-one with a student, the ability for them to actually record what they're doing and how they're thinking is something that only kind of technology can provide, and is a really kind of great layer to what their abilities are.
We're hinting what technology allows, what makes possible, because in the future, we're going to organize at least webinars that are more technical about the process, and we're going to cover both organizing Explain Everything projects using Google Classroom, but also schoolwork integration. So during those webinars, we're going to cover how to exchange those files, create videos, and respond with a video to a video created by the student. So you see all those technicalities of Explain Everything and the systems that store the artifacts of learning underneath Explain Everything.
Yeah, because we know that, you know, many people aren't using Explain Everything as their storage location for all these artifacts, right? They're all stored in someplace else. And we want to make that being able to work with these projects and work with these artifacts is quite easy. And so we've thought about a number of ways to kind of, organize and kind of create these libraries of artifacts that can easily be used and then referred back to when you're reviewing for tests or things like that. So, I hope this was quite useful. Again, so we have this idea, we have this one on organizing EE projects, and then we also have one coming up talking about how to create a book report.
Right.
Using Explain Everything.
And if you have questions to the process that Sam just covered, let us know. We still have a few minutes to respond to your questions live, so go ahead. If there's something that we should speak to, we're happy to do so.
Or, yeah, so if you have questions about that, or if you have ideas or thoughts about future webinars that we'll be running, we've run them quite often and we've had some great feedback. So if you have anything that you would like to see, maybe you want us to dive into some specific features a little bit more deeply. Maybe you want to talk about how folders are used within Explain Everything and how students can access folders and how folders can be shared. Maybe how codes work. You know, some of those things that there's information out there already, but you want us to kind of do a webinar focused on some of the stuff because it's important for you. If you have any ideas like that or feedback like that, we're designing some future webinars right now and are looking for that feedback. So you don't have to deliver it right now, but you know, we're always open to new ideas and want to hear from you guys. So
one exciting webinar idea that we just came up with is around GIF files, right? To make content that you share as a teacher with your students more interesting, that is animated content.
Yeah.
So this is something that we'll certainly do, just using GIF files.
Using EE to make GIFs.
Yeah. Short animated graphics illustrating the concepts, but also complexity, or solving some complexity by providing, animated illustrations
that are quite fun.
Yeah, they are.
Right.
And they can be also quite useful
Mm-hmm.
if you think about it. This is not just to have fun, it's also to provide, to deal with complexity in the end.
Great. Awesome. Well, again, thank you. I think we're pretty good for time. So thank you all for joining. If you have any other questions before we go, we'll give you back some time. It looks like we might have a few more questions coming in, but we will finish with these questions. And then again, I have here on the whiteboard, I will put the email that you can reach out to for questions. support@explaineverything.com is a great resource for questions that you have, if you have any challenges that you're facing in the classroom, or if you have any things that you want to kind of bounce back and forth. We've also got a great library here of assets that's wonderful and it's down here under support. We have this kind of getting started, using Explain Everything, managing groups, right? This is a great resource for kind of learning about the basics, some of these use cases, how to collaborate. We haven't even talked about collaboration at all today.
I'd say fun starts with illustrations here. Within those articles, we have videos that were created using Explain Everything, so we kind of like explain our own tool with our tool. Mm-hmm. There's an interesting question coming from Sven. If I share a video with multiple students and they each respond with their own short video that they provide to me, how will naming be handled in terms of like, adding names to the project? Yep. Titles. It's something that for now students would have to do manually to provide their name to the project name. So the project name can be, if you could show what it's changed just in here.
Oh yeah.
So the project name can be renamed here. So you can ask as a teacher to student to provide their name while naming the project name. They can also, when they share the recording, readjust the name for the web video link.
Yeah.
So when sharing, if they, let's say, forget to add student, their name here, they can, while sharing, readjust the name of the resulting video file, and it's just here.
Right. And there's a number of different things kind of built into this experience, right? So when you don't have to, for example, you don't have to allow the project to be downloaded, right? You can say, I don't want it to be downloaded. You can also change the permissions on what's available here. So you can say, you can only view this project. You actually can't interact or download it. You can also...
But for sharing templates, that will be useful and that will be necessary,
right,
to allow downloading the project.
Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. And if you're inviting students to actually be a contributor in an existing project, you're not just sharing it with them, but you're actually inviting them to collaborate with you. There's some permissions in here built in that they're just like Google Drive. When it's the difference between creating a web video link and creating a collaboration, in that you can kind of change, what some of these permissions are, right? So anyone with the link can view and download, but they can't edit, right? So they can't actually jump into your project and edit your existing project. They can only download a copy of it. But there's a number of kind of permissions built into that experience there. So that's a great question.
Fantastic, thanks. And we're happy to provide all those options. And as Sven just mentioned that he's satisfied with a number of settings and possibilities. Although, there's a second way of looking at it. It adds to the complexity. So for us, our job is finding the right balance between a number of possibilities that we provide and complexity of UI. And we always try to simplify the UI. So for example, this collaboration experience that Sam just mentioned, we're going to have a webinar on that as well, because there are changes in the UI that are coming that will simplify the experience and at the same time add more options to control the experience if you do the sessions with students. So stay tuned for that as well.
Yeah. So that'll be more about kind of structured collaboration.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's coming.
Great. And then, Yep. So you got this is kind of a great resource on our website, the support at explaineverything.com email address. If you're interested in licenses for school or for a district or for wherever you're coming from, you can write to support or sales@explaineverything.com. We'll be happy to help you with kind of getting people set up and getting you introduced to what's possible here. So
absolutely. And thank you for all of your questions and participation. For some of you, it's late during the night. So we encourage you to participate in other webinars. We'll be putting new ones to the schedule shortly.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for your time, and we'll give you back about 10 minutes for your evening or for your day. So again, follow up with us shortly, and thanks again for joining.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you.